Actually, speaking of theist callers, we do have one theist caller. And I've talked to this individual before. I think you have maybe spoke to this individual before.
Ruh-roh.
It is Otangelo.
Otangelo.
Yeah, Otangelo is calling in from Brazil. Otangelo, what's on your mind tonight? Pronouns are
Yes,
he,
hello
him. Sorry.
guys.
Hey.
Hi Paul, hi Nate.
Hey.
Yeah, so I've listened a little bit to the chat you guys had here in the stream. And Nate said that the only thing that would convince him that God exists is God would show up. So I don't think that you guys expect that the caller will call in to the show and then say that he can make a finger click and then God will show up somehow, right?
I mean, that's not necessarily the only thing that would convince me, but that's one glaring thing that almost definitely would. What do you think, Paul?
Well, I guess to the question, I'm actually not even convinced that something's showing up. I think I would probably try and figure out what I should be attributing that to, beyond merely just that it automatically assuming it's a God. All that said, I guess to Antangelo's question, no, I don't expect a caller to be able to make God appear. Although one of the good tests in the Old Testament was when it was the prophets of God versus the prophets of Baal, or the prophets of Yahweh, at least, where they would, they were calling down fire from heaven, and they would soak the altar of the Jewish altar, and they would soak it with water over and over again, and God still made it come and flash down. So I guess there is some precedent for a Christian, or I guess at that point, someone who just believes in Yahweh, making a call and having evidence appear. So maybe you're that guy.
Yeah, well, I don't have that power, but if it would not be such kind of proof, what else would convince you?
Well, I'll tell you, in my early atheist days, one of the things that sort of almost brought me back was the intelligent design argument, which I know you've attempted to champion many, many times. But I read Michael Behe's 1995 book, Darwin's Black Box, and I actually found it quite compelling. I found it pretty convincing. And so what I did was thought to myself, well, maybe there's another version of this. Maybe let's see what the other side says. And so I read a different book called The Blind Watchmaker and realized that, oh, okay, there absolutely are answers for these arguments. This author just wasn't clever enough or hasn't put enough effort in, or for whatever reason wasn't able to crack the case. So it's not that I'm completely it's not that I won't consider opposing arguments. I just haven't heard any that were good enough to convince me that gods are real. Last time you called in with the amino acid thing. Remember that?
Yeah, the watchmaker has to do with evolution. And the irreducible complexity argument doesn't apply only to biology, it applies also to the origin of life. So you have the need of a minimal complex bacteria or last universal common ancestor. There is a threshold where you cannot go lower. And if you don't have that kind of complexity, then you don't have a self-replicating living cell. So his argument applies to that, and you don't have evolution prior to DNA replication. So once you don't have actually that mechanism, the only alternative to an intelligent designer would be unguided random stochastic events. And what science has discovered through over 70 years of abiogenesis research is that molecules, rather than to complexify, they devolve. They become more simple. They become asphalts. They never go into the direction to complexify to become life.
But molecules do arrange in ways that are complex, even if not to life, right? Like, so snowflakes form, or crystals form, or other more complex molecules than helium just form, right? So that's not entirely true what you're saying. You're just talking about a specific threshold that you would call non-life to life. Is that correct?
Yes, we know what the need is to have life, like self-replication, adapting to the environment, actual evolution to self-repairing, and so forth. So there are several things that characterize life. And of course, if we are talking about snowflakes is not the same like DNA, for example. So there's a big
no, but I just was wondering if you were denying that entropy can be overcome. Like, entropy can be overcome and is often overcome. I mean, photosynthesis, guess that's technically life, but there's lots of non-living processes that overcome entropy. So philosophically, there's nothing stopping molecules from crossing that threshold to life. We just may not know exactly what path it took. I'm also curious as to why you're setting the line at cell when we know that, for example, the common idea now is that RNA was, RNA world, right? That RNA was the thing that was self-replicating as opposed to jumping right to a cell.
Yeah, this is a myth. It has never been shown in the laboratory that RNA can self-replicate. But even before you have actually RNA, I don't know how much you have studied biochemistry, Paul, but RNA is a complex molecule. It is made of three parts, which is the base, the backbone, and phosphate. And these parts need to be joined at the right place in the backbone. And you have many different possibilities. So, and there was no selection prebiotically, and that is a huge problem for naturalistic explanations.
How do you mean there's no selection? So obviously if some of these chemicals ever did begin self-replicating, then they had better survival advantages than the chemicals that didn't arrange in that configuration.
Well, first of all, you don't have life at that stage. But as I said previously, first you need to have actually the RNA molecule. And a self-replicating RNA enzyme has never been actually shown to exist. So this is a myth.
Well, clearly a self-replicating RNA molecule didn't drop from the sky one day. So we talked about this the last time that you called, and I just think that you're kind of suffering from a lack of imagination. Like the four basic blocks of most of biological life are basically come from four elements, right? One has one possible bond, one has two, one has three, one has four, right? Like nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen. So nitrogen, yeah. So like, and they're literally everywhere. They're the four most plentiful elements on Earth. So why is it so difficult to imagine that at some point they arranged themselves and at some point they formed new bonds? Like, that seems to me to be likely to happen. And you kind of said, like, we know that molecules don't form, with entropy and they but like Paul said, there are absolutely tons of chemicals and non-biological bonds that can be formed, right? Like there's stones, and there's so many different examples of elements combining to form new things. So I don't know, like, where are you coming from with that?
Well, Nate,
I'm having trouble wrapping my head around that.
What staggers Yeah, Nate, what staggers me is that you demand me literally to have imagination in regards of something which has never been shown actually to be possible. And I wonder, you guys want God to show up, but you guys have blind belief that molecules can somehow join to make the basic building blocks of life, which is something which has never been shown in the lab to be possible by random means. But you guys believe it. So you guys believe that life can come from non-life by unguided means. You believe it, but you have.
I believe that it happened because I'm here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a
well,
blind
we are
guess.
here, but that can have two possible explanations. One is that God made us, and the other is that natural unguided events in the prebiotic earth made us. But there is no evidence that this is possible. Science has failed to prove even that the basic building blocks of life, it's not just the elements, it is amino acids, phospholipids, nucleotides, and carbohydrates. These are the four basic building blocks, and they are all complex, and science has no clue in regards of any of them, how they could have been made prebiotically. And we know that the cell uses very complex...
Otangelo, we talked about this the last time you called in, right? Just because we don't know how it happened yet doesn't mean your God did it, right? Like, even if we were able to demonstrate that there's no way that amino acids or chemicals could form to form amino acids without help, even if you could demonstrate that, which you can't because, as you say, we have no evidence for this. Even if you could say that could never have happened in nature, that doesn't mean your God did it, right? Like, if I asked you, how many miles is it from LA to New York, right? And you said it's 4 miles. And you asked me the same question, and I said, I don't know. That doesn't make your answer correct. It's not 4 miles from LA to New York, bud. Paul, what did you want to add to this? I can see you chopping at the bit.
All I wanted to add was that, you know, when you, if you're looking for where that gap is, we observe natural processes all the time. Like if you went and 1,000 years ago and said, posited black holes to people and said, well, there's no evidence for black holes 1,000 years ago. That's just a function of time and when they existed and what could be measured at the time. Like I'm not super concerned right now that there are a few things that we can't do in a lab. So like the idea of you bringing up what you can or can't do in a lab as a standard of what we should believe seems a little bit arbitrary to me based on when I'm living. But again, we're looking for, we observe natural processes all the time, all kinds of natural processes. We know that biological life exists. We imagine that there was a time when biological life didn't exist, because there seems to be evidence that there was a time before life, and I think you would agree. And so we can say, okay, I agree with you. There's two things. So one is that there was natural processes, and the other is that it wasn't natural processes. So then I go looking for, okay, well, if I want to consider non-natural processes to be in the conversation, are there other non-natural processes that you can even point me to before we include it as a candidate explanation?
You said that way better than I did. Thank you.
Well, the distinction is either is there intelligence which is involved in creating life or it is not. This is the big dichotomy here. Either God was involved or not. And I'll quote here, cells have a codified description of themselves in a digital form stored in genes and have the machinery to transform it into the physical reality of that description. Only minds can create this. And
why can only, so I agreed with you up until you said only minds can create this. And I don't
citation needed.
I mean, so you're just declaring that a category of things exist, and that's what we're looking for. I am not convinced that a mind is necessary for what we see. You are convinced that a mind is necessary for what we see. that just leaves us at a stalemate. And I think both of us think that the other person is being credulous. And so I think, Otangelo, if you want me on your side on this, you're going to need to bring more than declaring that that's how it was. I don't know if you listened to the conversation I had before, but I'm tired of having, I lived my whole life just accepting on authority that that's the way it was. And so I don't care who quoted to you that a mind is necessary. I need you to demonstrate that a mind is necessary.
I can give you an example, Paul. My profession is machine designer. I design machines as a profession. And if I have to make a machine for a specific purpose, I need to use my mind. I have to have foresight. I need to know the materials that are required, the dimensions of the individual parts, how they will be brought together. And then I will put all this into the design of that object. And I will sit down on the computer, on the drawing table, and draw that machine. And that is precisely what we see in a gene, where we have the instructional assembly information to make all the parts of the cell, and then in the end, the chemical factory, which is the cell.
I guess I have to disagree.
Information directs the making of all the parts of the cell, and it also has all the parts to transmit that information from the gene to the ribosome, where it's translated and then becomes the 3D physical form, which is the molecule, the protein, the molecular machine. This is high-tech technology, which had to be all there right when life started.
No, it didn't.
If you can, of course, say intelligence was not necessary, but then you are left with random chance because there was no evolution yet. And you can make the calculation to have a string of 100 amino acids sequenced in the right specified sequence. You have 1 to 10 to the 130th power of different possibilities. That is the number, more than the number of atoms in the universe, and that would
right. But you're assuming for some reason you're assuming that there was no selection before life, and I just don't buy that.
No.
Again,
you have only selection and evolution when you have DNA replication, and that's
you don't need DNA replication. You just need replication.
You need replication.
Yeah, I got to tell you, like, if I take a big bag of Legos and jumble them around a little bit, I'm not going to be surprised when a couple of them attach to each other.
Yeah, something else which you said, well, I think that these molecules, they could join somehow, but what actually the experiments show is hydrolysis. Actually, that the bones, they are, they don't hold when they come in touch with water. And if you don't have water, you don't have life. So actually, random events, rather than join polymerization, the contrary happens. These
Wait.
They are very unstable
wait a
and
second.
they disintegrate.
I got a question for you, though. What's water made of?
Oxygen and hydrogen.
H2O, right? So there we go. Yeah. There are two elements combining to form something different, which you just said can't happen. And there's a shit ton of water on this planet, Otangelo.
I am talking, for example, about the joining of a nucleobase to the ribose, which is the backbone for RNA and DNA. All experiments have shown that it is not possible.
As much fun as this stroll down memory lane was, I think we're going to have to move on, Otangelo. But thank you very much for calling, and we shall talk to you later, sir. Every time it's like the same argument is I don't know, so God did it.
Yeah, it ultimately boils down to, and he didn't tell me why all of a sudden the supernatural became a candidate piece of evidence. He went to intelligence, but that didn't talk to me about anything supernatural. I also don't buy that DNA is information in the way that he thinks it is. But anyway, we don't need to rehash the call. You can listen to many times Otangelo calling in, so